Hello and welcome to Everything I Did Wrong as a Church Planter, a million-part series. My name is Logan Wolf, and I'm coming to you from my office in Provo, Utah. And man, what I'm doing in this podcast is recounting the last 13 years of ministry here in Utah. Our ministry has taken so many different shapes and forms. We started as a mobile church, meeting in the conference center of a hotel, a Best Western. And we did that for 5 years before we navigated a church merger and became multi-site overnight with buildings and staff in 2 different counties. We did that for a number of years before offloading that entire structure and becoming a network of house churches, now functioning across the state of Utah. And as I look back on all that, I realize I would do pretty much everything differently. Every single thing I did, I would do differently. And so my hope is, as you listen to this, or as you share it with your church planting friends or your church planting team, I can just spare you some of the heartache and the frustration and the many, many missteps that I made, as well as just your time and your energy and your money. And so in these last few episodes, I've been kind of recounting that season leading up to what was our grand opening service, our launch service in 2011 here in Utah. But I've brought on some several other voices the last several episodes, and that's the case today. Some brothers sharing their experience during a similar time, a similar phase in their own ministry, and what they would do differently as they're looking back on it. And I think it's going to be really encouraging for you. So today I'm joined by my friend Matt Manney, and he is coming to us from Pennsylvania. Matt, how are you, sir?
Hey, Logan, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation and be able to help and share whatever I can.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Why don't you start for us and just recount maybe a little bit of your background,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of your faith journey and what brought you into church planting, and then you and I can dissect some of those mistakes you've made.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Our story starts. I grew up in Southeast Pennsylvania and grew up in multiple different denominations, and my parents, they kind of grew in their faith and had us in different settings. And as time went on, I realized that I felt God's call on my life to go into ministry and wanted to pursue that. So as the son of a church secretary and an auto mechanic, that was kind of a mixture of a little bit of the church conservative side of things, but also some of the greasy, blue collar. And so went off to Bible college, and I got the bug of I want to go big, and I want to go loud, and I want to have a big church. And the church I grew up in and was trained in had about 1,000 people. And then the college I went off to had about 3,000 or 4,000 people. My wife's church that she came from had almost 1,000 people. So it was like, God, this is in the stars. This was meant to be. So we left a very affluent area. Right now it's the most affluent county in Pennsylvania and the safest city in all of Pennsylvania, that we left to come to one of the second most dangerous areas outside of Philadelphia. And financially there's some challenges there. And I thought that I was going to be the different, and like you had mentioned earlier, in our lead up conversation, I was going to be the savior and come to a place where people had kind of told me it's a graveyard of churches, and I thought I was going to be the exception. And God showed me very differently. I learned very fast that I was not going to come in and be the exception.
Well, so what do you think? Because that is such a common thread. I was just having the last episode, I had a conversation with Doug Lane, one of the church planners I was telling you about, came to Utah and not playing. And his big takeaway from that experience was he had put his identity in the work. So do you feel like, because I had that savior complex as well, do you feel like it was an identity issue for you, or was it just the zeal of what do you think led to that?
Go
ahead.
Yes. So I think, and like I probably overshare sometimes, but some of the origin story. So I'm 13 years old, and I'm going to a good church. I'm going to a small private Christian school, and 7th grade, I'm going into middle school, and find out my dad is being arrested for tax fraud.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he ends up loses his business, and God works in amazing ways, and it turned out okay. But I watched my dad lose his business, lose his reputation, lose respect of people, a lot of rumors and things. The church was gracious and helped our family out through that time, lost our home. And through all that, I lost a little bit of respect for my dad. Now, our relationship's great today,
Right.
but through all that, I saw the only male in my life at that time that I saw as a point of stability, who had respect, who had love of people, was my pastor. And so I latched onto that in that difficult time. And I made a vow at 13 that I'm never going to lose people's respect. I'm never going to have this happen to me. And so I'm going to have to be like that guy I see on Sunday who's just stable, who everybody loves. So from that point on, it was like, this is what I'm going to do. So really, and you know how that goes, really a faulty foundation to base your identity on, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it all kind of started, and it came back to bite later on, big time.
Yeah. So okay, so you moved in, but when you guys moved into the community, it's just you and your wife at that point, right? Or do you already have your family? 'Cause you've got-
So we have my wife, and then one son. Our daughter was born 2 days before launch day, which was dumb,
What?
super stupid. My wife didn't even make it to the first day. So our daughter was born on Thursday, and launch day was on Sunday. I don't know. I just didn't time it right.
So was you okay? Because I had a whole episode about the brevity of time between moving to my community and launching. How much time, just for the sake of our audience, how much time between you moved there and that launch service?
Yeah, so we moved in middle July of 2011, and then we launched 7 weeks later on September 18th. So maybe it was 8 weeks. So we hit hard. We handed out something like 15,000 flyers door to door. We mailed 30. 2 weeks before, I get a call from the township building, from the inspector, and says, the building that you have on your flyers is not zoned for church. So I don't know who you think you are, but you need to come talk to me before you're not allowed to meet there. If you meet there, I'm going to come and shut it down and fine you and your organization. So,
oh my gosh.
So you talk about regrets. So the building that we had to scramble and get a new building. My wife, she got shingles because she was so stressed. The doctor asked her, like, hey, you just had a baby, is anything else stressful in your life? She's like, well, my husband and I are starting a church and we just moved to the area. And he's like, yeah, that might be a little stressful.
That's a lot.
So,
Oh my goodness, bro. We moved in July of 2011. We moved in May of 2011, a couple months before you. But we launched the week after you launched. Then we launched the 25th. And I thought that was stupid how much little you gave. You even went shorter than we went. That is insane. That is insane. Okay, so for now you've opened the can of worms. So the building is not usable.
Right.
And so where did you guys end up meeting? Because you've already paid to promote that building. So what did you? Okay. Oh my gosh.
So my mentor calls me up and says, hey, I didn't even tell him. I was so scared to tell him because I was like, this is doomed to fail. And remember, the whole time I'm basing this off the mindset of I can't fail. I don't want to lose respect. I have to like prove myself.
Yeah.
And so he found out. I don't know if I called him or somebody else told him, but anyway, so he drove down and to our area, we're like 45 minutes to an hour from where he's pastoring, and we just went from one place to the next. Hey, do you have a room we can rent? Calling around. We finally came across a Presbyterian church, and it was, so again, they're renting to the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts. They had another church already meeting there. They had a daycare there. And they wouldn't let us put up a sign. So we literally, it was the only place we could find to get our foot in the door this late in the game. So we come in, we met on Sunday at 8:00. Our service went from 8:00 to 9:00. We were allowed to have a sign up during the service, but then we had to take it down afterward. So we had people showing up to our service who thought it was Sunday school for the Presbyterian church. There's a Lutheran church that was a block away, and people from that church would show up. So then we met in the morning. The Presbyterians came in, a charismatic Pentecostal group met then after that. and then we came back for Sunday night. Monday was Boy Scouts, Tuesday was Cub Scouts, Wednesday we met, Thursday was AA there, and then they had daycare all the week.
Wow, that church
So
was raking
yeah,
in the
yeah, they had a
the
lot of
rental,
yeah.
the
So
rental
anyway,
money.
it was just we just did everything. And because I was afraid, Logan, and I was afraid to ask for help the whole time. I was afraid. I was like trying to make decisions, and I was like scrambling, stressing out, and I was mad at, what, this is dumb, but since we're going there, I was mad at my wife the whole time because she was trying to keep up, and she works hard. She's super strong, but I was like, man, if my family's going to hold me back in ministry, because I had a little bit of that old school mindset of, our mentor generation of like, work hard, love God, and he'll take care of your family. So you don't have to kind of almost, and then this sounds horrible, and I hope you don't get any hate mail from this, but like, that's kind of a little bit.
You if I do. So.
Yeah. But it was like, I just had a lot of faulty mindsets, and I was really fearful that people, my family would hold me back. And so God really had to break me down. And changed my heart. So yeah, I did. It's a miracle we're still here. We're still here
that's incredible. How far was that Presbyterian church from where you were promoting your service? Like, did you
it was like literally around the corner, so it wasn't it was like a 5-minute drive. So it wasn't bad. So
very good. And how did you communicate that change? Because
we had locked in the Presbyterian location before our first service. So the first service was an old, the building we were going to be in was an old textile building that was built in like the late 1800s that they were converting into office spaces. And there's a daycare there, and there was a bunch of offices in there. It was like a kind of like a just open spaces they were converting in, and I thought it was like, this is so cool. This is like the rough and rugged, and it's not a church building. So anybody that came that day, we had flyers ready to send them to the new location. And so yeah.
So hindsight, would you have waited longer to launch your church?
I would have. I think, and I don't know if this would lead into a good discussion or not. I think if I would have known what I know today, I probably wouldn't have started. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have planted. But God knew better, and it was almost like God lovingly blinded. Because the other thing too is there's a lot of churches in the area too. Like, there's some really, really good churches. Now there's 500,000 people in a 5-mile radius, so there's plenty of people to go around.
Yeah.
But it was like, I don't know who's helping who. It's like people get their dog. Like, I don't know who saved who. But I think, like, as much as I want to come to this area and save people and change their lives, God took a whole city and was like just chiseling stuff off my life.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's slide ahead a little bit. You launch and talk us through. Let's start moving towards what you and I had talked about just leading up to the recording.
Yeah.
What was going on in the launch? What was the vision going forward? What were you trying to do? What were you communicating to people? Talk us through that.
So it came out of a super strong church that was very organized, very I would say strong on buildings, strong on finances, strong on programming. So really they had everything for anybody. So you take that at a church that's 1,000 people, big staff, and I come down and I say, hey, if you've got kids, we've got it for you. Well, like, I had small kids, but we didn't have a Sunday school class for children, you've got teenagers, we've got a youth group. And it was like, to fake it till you make it. Well, I was going to be the youth pastor too. Like, we've got a full choir, and that was me and my wife. She plays the piano. So we did like a missions conference, and we had a Bible study. We did marriage retreats. We had a guy in our church who, he had rented some billboards in the area for his business. And he said, oh, hey, I've got a month. Would you like that for your church, or for the church, to be able to promote? And I was like, yeah, sure. This is great. So he's like, yeah, send me a graphic. And looking back, I'm like, I don't even want to tell you what I put on the billboard, but I got it. All right. Yeah, so I've done dumb stuff. It's a giant picture of me and our church's name. And it was the dumbest thing ever, because I'd seen another pastor do it. And my neighbors actually brought it up. Nobody in our church talked to me about it. Nobody ever like called the church about it. Was like, hey, that handsome man in a suit and tie. Like, so my neighbor was like, hey, and he's a good Catholic guy, like, you know, always busted my chops. He was like, hey, saw your picture out on Baltimore Bike. What was that thought? And I was like, what are you talking about?
What
He was
was
like,
that thought?
yeah, he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm just trying to promote the ministry. And he's like, through your face? And I'm like, okay, dude, you know. So anyway, yeah. So we tried to
Wow.
run programs. We tried to have stuff for everybody. And in the midst of all that, you know, we're working with people who are coming from the church that supported us. We had asked about 40 individuals, probably about 15 families or so, to come help us. So they're commuting. And again, that was a problematic because the idea was they would help us set the table, but then they would be like the scaffolding, maybe is a better way to illustrate it. They would be the scaffolding to help us get the building going. And then eventually they would move back, you know, and start attending.
Yeah.
So we had people commit to a year, 2 years. We had one or
Oh,
two
wow.
families move to the area with us, but of those families, 12 years later, you know, we have 2 families, you know,
Yeah.
which is pretty good after over a
So how
decade.
many people how many people was at your launch service?
So our launch service, we had like 50 people. 10 of those were just, you know how it goes, like, hey,
I
rah
don't,
rah,
bro.
grandma.
I launched with 14 people, so I don't.
Oh, okay, okay,
So
okay.
I have
So,
no clue
so
how
yeah,
it's supposed
okay,
to.
yeah. So 50 people. 10 of them were like, you know, aunts, grandmas, cousins. Like,
Okay.
hey,
Yeah.
we're happy for you.
Supporting you.
Yeah, rah rah. And then we had a solid 40. And then over time, those folks kind of dwindled away, and we replaced those from people from the area. But over the 12 years, it was always like hitting the lid, you know. And I don't know if we want to go there, but I read a ton. Nelson Searcy, and one of his books was like, I was reading in my townhouse one day, and I just read and read and read, and then finally, because I read enough books, this magic spiritual thing happened, and we grew. And I was like, okay, that's what I need to have happen.
Did
So
he say? I've never. Did he say that?
yeah, in one of his books, I don't
It
remember
says
what
on
book
his read.
but he just said he read a lot, and he had like some older ladies that he went to go visit, and they prayed with him, prayed for him, and then the church, he implemented systems and structures, and the church started to grow. And I was like, okay, I need to read a ton and implement systems and structure, and that'll be the fix. So I went from program oriented to systems and structure. And then Warren Bird,
Oh yeah.
read all his stuff.
Yeah. What
The
did you
like
read?
so
What did you read?
his Breaking the 200 Barrier.
Oh yeah.
So read The Hero Maker, read all these different guys, just read a ton, a bunch of John Maxwell, because Perry Noble read John Maxwell. And then I thought that, like, okay, I'm going to be able to, learn from these gurus. But I think that all that to say, God wired me to lead small. I know, hands down,
Oh
totally hands down. I knew that
yeah.
today, because we've had, and you know how this goes. If everybody we've had walk through our door over the last decade would stay, we'd be easily a church of like 600 people.
Yeah.
But the people that have walked through our door, predominantly the common denominator that all those people have had was they were hurt, and they come and they heal, and they enjoy the culture that we've created, and they get healthy, and then God moves them on. We've had people get new jobs, people get married, people relocate, and they're doing fantastic now. We've had people start businesses. Like, God gave me a dream and a desire and a vision to start a business, and then they relocate. I'm like, why can't you stay here and have a business?
Yeah.
But we've stayed right around that 40 to 50 level. We have some big Sundays and things like that, but looking at how God's wired me, the area, and then the people that connect with my style of leadership and speaking and preaching and my temperament and spirit, I'm like, that was a pivotal moment when I figured that out. Yeah. Big change.
Well, because that's that's juxtaposed to what you grew up in. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a huge difference to grow up in a ministry where you're talking, 1,000+ people.
Yeah.
And then to go say, that's not what's happening here in our ministry.
Yeah.
So let's tie some of these themes together. Obviously,
Okay.
there's that identity piece.
Yeah.
That you hit on. Like, I don't want to disappoint anybody. I don't want to be disrespect. I don't want to all this. And then it's fleshing out perhaps in a way differently, it sounds like, than
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you may have envisioned. So what was
yeah.
anything learning in that
So
process, or was that over time?
yeah,
Because you've been there, you just said, remind me, how long have you been there now?
that
It's
we'll celebrate our 12th anniversary coming up here in September. So yeah,
12 years. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm sure, like me, like some of these other brothers I've had on the podcast, you're probably not where you thought you would be 12
No,
years 12
no,
years in.
no.
So talk us through a little bit of that
Yeah.
experience.
So, and I shared a little bit this with you, and my heart isn't to like to try to glamorize, stuff or get gory details, but to for anybody out there to say like whatever their story or situation they may be going through, hey, like you're not the only one.
Mhm.
And not to minimize what other people are going through, but to say like just to give them a little bit of hope. So we had gone through all these different highs and lows. We hit a really good stride where we did a building campaign to get out of our rental space. I knew that we needed to get something permanent, and so that was our big goal, and that was a really solid vision for us. So we raised, close to 130 grand from our
Wow.
small little like. I'll never forget the day somebody dropped a check for $26,000, and I was like, I don't
Wow.
even know how to handle this. Like, will the bank take
Will
this?
they
You
take
know?
this from? Yeah. Can I
Yeah,
catch this?
like, I didn't know yeah, like, I was like, "I don't even this is, like, weird," because you know how it goes.
Yep.
So, anyway, we got into a bought a building, got into a property, everything was going, I was like, "Okay, great." So, we started making some changes, and then I started getting a kickback from people. "We moved, we think you're changing, we're not sure this direction," you know how it goes.
Yeah.
Um, and so then it was kinda like there's a little bit of rumblings there. Then I got, from some other people, hey, we think God's moving us on, and that's the last thing you want to hear. You want to like, you know how it is. Like you got
Uh,
a guy smiling, oh, amen. I'm so happy. And then you go home, and you're like, the kids are like,
it's
Dad, why are you so angry? I'm not angry. If I'm angry, I'll tell you I'm angry.
it's so hard because it is so hard. I tell you what I hate about those conversations, and this is neither here nor there with
Yeah,
our
go for
topic,
it.
but it's the person coming and telling you that has been thinking about it and
Yeah,
has had time to think about it and
yeah.
process it, and then they just spring it on you.
Before
And you
service.
right, and you don't have right before, like you don't have the time or the space to process it and think through it like they have.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's like we've been looking at moving for the last 6 months, and just now, and they're going to tell me, and
yeah,
it's like, well, you've had 6 months to think through it, and
yeah,
bro, a lot of
yeah,
emotion comes up. Like I
yeah,
know all
yeah.
the, and it's hard not to take it personally.
Right. And it's like a bad day. It's like, listen, it's not you, it's me. It's me. And you're like, no, it's not. No,
Oh, yes, that
yeah.
is such a man. That's a hard
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
That's a
So in the process of all that, and God was moving, but we lost, I think I ran the numbers, we lost 47% over a 6-month period.
wow.
So I'll never forget the day the payroll company called and said, we went to go ahead and pull your paycheck from the account, and there's not enough money there. What are you going to do about it? My in-laws were in town, and I had to take the call, and I walked out. We went to this like really famous place to go out to eat in Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, here in PA. And I walked out of the building, and just my heart, like I had a panic, like an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
My father-in-law came out, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on? Can I help with anything?" I'm like, how am I going to tell my father-in-law I can't take care of your daughter or your grandkids anymore because I'm a moron. So anyway,
Yep.
we had to move. We had to sell our house. And again, if you remember, 13, we lost our house. I'm like talking to my wife Amanda, is this it? Like, am I not cut out to be a pastor? And we had to pick up. I started driving for Uber Eats at night, and then Amazon during the day, and then delivering packages, and then started, and still trying to prep a sermon and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting across the table from my wife, checking my phone to see if I could take, Amazon, they would populate routes that you could pick up to go deliver packages and stuff. And so she was like, what are you doing on your phone? And I was like, I'm just looking for work. And so she said, like, I was talking to, I can't remember how she put it. Oh, she said, I was talking to your parents the other day when they came over for dinner, and they asked me if you were okay, and I said, I can't speak for you. And that cut me to the core. We got into a big fight, and I was
Mm,
like, listen, if I don't have your support, then I'm done. And if you don't think I can cut it as a pastor, then I wish somebody would be honest with me and have the guts to tell me to stop pastoring, because I would have never done this if I'm this bad at this job. If everybody who's And so we got into this big fight, and she started crying,
yeah.
and I was angry. And it was at that point then, and we talked about this a little bit previous, but it was at that point I started there's an access road behind our house that goes to a swim club. And I started thinking about, okay, I'm gonna go, and I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna dress myself early in the morning when my wife and kids are still in bed, and I'm gonna lay down next to the road down there. So when the ambulance comes to pick up my body, I'm a big guy. I don't want to be embarrassed and have, even after I do the worst decision of my life, I don't want
Right.
them to have to carry me very far. I looked out my back window and I picked the spot out, and I said, I'm gonna kill myself there, and
Man.
because I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And if
Yeah.
I'm losing my church and I don't have, and people love me, and it was Satan. Man,
Yeah.
Satan doesn't play fair.
No, he does not.
Um, so yeah, like, and that's where I was. That was my crisis moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brother, that sucks. And I think, I know it's not, and I know we've already hashed this out privately,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's not a unique. I feel like every church planter comes in thinking one
Right.
thing,
Right.
and they get into the just slogging it out day in and day out. And you're right, it's not just the work, the nature of the ministry. There is an enemy looking to destroy it
Hmm.
outright. And so
Hmm. Hmm.
I think I appreciate you sharing that and the vulnerability there, because
Yeah.
it lets, hopefully the guys listen to this, they're going through it themselves. I'm giving them
Yeah.
permission to tell someone that, like, man, I
Yeah.
am not in a good place. This is not
Yeah.
what I signed up for, not what I thought it
Yeah.
would be. So
Yeah.
that sucks, bro.
Yeah. 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 And so in the midst of all that, the next step was, I had to have a real strong coming to moment with Jesus kind of thing.
Yeah. So what happened?
And so we finally, I feel like if people listen to this and they haven't planted churches yet, they probably won't, because
Let's stop here. The point, we are not trying to dissuade
yes,
anybody
yeah,
from your
thank you for saying
calling.
that.
We are not
Yeah.
trying to discourage you, but I think there's aspects of it that don't make it into the books or
Yeah.
the radio
Yeah.
programs or something. So go ahead, brother.
Yeah.
Keep
So
sharing your
so
story.
I think the thing that changed everything for me was, um we so about 4 years before this whole thing happened, we had a car fire in our driveway. A a a church member's ex-husband, Amanda, testified in court in a court case for a child support um battle. And the day after Christmas, he torched our van in our driveway at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Gosh.
So for 4 years, my poor wife, she would wake up every day at 4 o'clock and in a panic, and she couldn't sleep. So her way of dealing with it was to look for homes on Zillow and realtor.com. And that drove me bonkers, because I'm like, we are staying here. My family moved a ton when I was a kid, and moving means failure. I'm not going to work
Wow.
a second job, because that means, like, so I just was really not being spirit filled. And so finally one day, she she was in the bathroom. We had just had this like big discussion, the stuff that you don't want any of your church members to know. You talk,
Yep.
like, because pastors don't fight, right, with their spouse. And so she's in the bathroom, and she's crying. And we hadn't, if I think back now on it, there's nothing that precipitated, but she just was crying in the bathroom enough that I could hear. And so finally I like knocked on the door, and, hey, like, are you okay? What's going on? And she said, like, I just don't think that you understand. I'm not trying to make life more difficult. I don't feel safe here anymore. And then it clicked for me. Like,
Wow.
she's not trying to be argumentative. It's me. I'm the problem. Like, hey, Taylor Swift, it's me. You know? So I'm the anti-hero. So I was like, okay, I give. We January 1st, we called a realtor friend of mine. He came over 2 days later. That weekend, he said, in a month, I'm going to come back. You got a month to get your house ready to go. We took a month to redo everything. And by February, we had it on the market and we sold it in a week. And then we looked for a new house. We moved then by April, after everything had gone through. And we moved in April of 2019, got into a better financial situation with our house. And then the pandemic hit 18 months later. And I was, or no, not even 18 months later. No, it was, just about a year later. March of 2020, I was like, God, you just saved us from this massive, I had no idea that you were working.
Yeah.
So it's all these like little things that God does in these crazy ways, and getting our attention and chiseling away those rough edges. And like, and I wish I could understand, hindsight's 2020, that God is shouting like, I love you. I
Amen.
want the best for you, my son.
Amen.
Like, I am for you, and I'm for your wife. And through all that, God really got a hold of my heart. And like, even shout out to my wife. Like, I hated driving by myself. Like, I like to be around people. I hated driving the gig stuff. And so she worked it out with our schedules and stuff, that she would go with me when we would deliver packages. I would drive and she would navigate, and the kids would call out the numbers for wherever we were going, and she would hop out and drop the package off at the door, and we did it together. Wow. So one of the things that we had talked about that's been the saving grace for us, for our family, is you can go, it's like a Nigerian proverb, or an African proverb that says you can go fast alone or far together.
Yeah. So
we're like, okay, this is, that's been kind of a guiding family principle for us. So, fast forward, God chiseled off those things, as I mentioned before, helping me to understand that I lead small, and it's okay to be small. There's nothing wrong with that, and to learn how to pivot. And so he's giving us now a whole different ministry arm through writing. We've picked up some learning how to produce books and journals and devotionals and materials. And so it's really been exciting. And there's other opportunities now that we're starting to get into, to be able to reach people through other avenues of writing as well.
Yeah.
That just never, God's just opening up doors now. Never imagined. But I couldn't do it if I was pastoring a church of 150, 250, anything that I thought I wanted to do.
And so here's it's always interesting to have people say that. You're not the first one to have said that, where the mistakes brought you to where you are.
Yeah.
So like the nature of this, a podcast like this, where you're rehashing mistakes, I think we have to acknowledge, I mean, you and I and any other guy that's been on here already, if it weren't for the mistakes, you wouldn't be the man, the husband, the pastor, the church planter that you are. And so there is this, I don't think you like a purpose, and is to encourage these guys behind us and to give some advice and point some things we do differently. But I don't think you can ever wait till you get it all figured out either. Like,
no,
you got to jump into it and just know that in that journey, God is going to show himself faithful, and he is going to shape you, and he is going to chisel those things away. And that's just part of it. You're not going to have a perfect, conflict, turmoil free kind of journey. That's just not the nature of life. But so let's go back, because you touched on it before. We circumnavigated all over the place, and then now you just mentioned again, you weren't doing what you thought you were going to be doing. You grew up in these larger ministries, had visions of grandeur for what you would be doing. Coming in here, I'm going to be respected, I'm going to do this, I'm going to see this through, and this 12 years later, it looks very different. What did you have to shake off in the processes? You talk about programs and systems. What did you put in place that you realized, this is, in our setting, in our context, in our, mission field, this is superfluous? Like, what did that look like that you brought in that you said, actually, this is stupid?
I can't point to a moment or an event where it was like, in a movie, like, oh, this is where the hero realizes what they have to do, But I can say,
Act 2.
I finally realized, this is going to sound so dumb, but it's not about me. Like our church and ministry, started out with a billboard of my face, you know. um but it's not about me, and I pivoted and realized that my job, for whoever walks through those doors, however many people that may be, my job at the end of the day is to help people take their next step.
Yeah.
So if they're not a believer, the next step is, what can I do to help you to put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ? If you're on the other end of things and you've been walking with Jesus for a long time, what can I do to help you to become a mentor to other people that need
Yeah.
some encouragement? And then everything in between. And as soon as I changed that, my mindset, things began to change for me. Our church, we start at 10:45, and without fail, we'll have, maybe 5, 6 people in the audience. But by 11:45, when we're wrapping up and going to dismiss, we'll have a good 30, 40 people there. But for every Sunday, and you know how this goes, every Sunday, we've got an older church, and there's these big, tall, 12-foot solid wooden doors. The church was built in the 1870s,
Mm.
and we still have the same latches there, the same handle. And when somebody turns that latch, this little piece of metal clicks, and it's just that right sound that it echoes through the auditorium. And it was like Pavlov's dog, because I would hear that click, and I would literally get a hit of dopamine in my brain, and I'd get excited. How many people are going to walk through the door? And it would just, like, I'd have dreams about it, where I would hear that click, and okay, who's going to walk through the door? Because it was like I was like a crack addict,
Yeah.
like addicted to this sound.
Wow.
And now to this, and if I didn't hear it, I'd be upset. I'm trying to lead worship or preach or whatever. I didn't hear the click. I didn't hear the click. And then now it's gotten to the point where I've learned, and I'm starting to do a little bit more study about attachment styles to God and to other people. That's a whole other discussion. But I realized I was looking for fulfillment from people from the clique, and it doesn't matter how many people show up, how much money comes in, that God has given other avenues of ministry and fulfillment outside of Sunday morning, so that my joy doesn't rise and fall on Sunday.
Yeah.
And that no matter who walks through the door, I don't have to, like, hey, what can you do to help grow my ministry? To what
Yeah.
can I do to help you grow in your walk with God? And the pressure that I'm sleeping so much better now. I can't even tell you. And it's not easy, and I still struggle with it, but and you know how it goes. Sunday night social media is like death for us, because
Man.
everybody posts
Man.
numbers and pictures, and I'm like, I hate every other pastor out there, like with a passion. And I'm like, I don't care that you, like,
I
whatever,
know. I
but I would
know.
go on there and I would kill myself, and I get angry and like, okay, it's bedtime. And the man is
Yep.
like, were you on Facebook again? I'm gonna sneak on your phone and delete all your accounts, you know?
I had to I deleted it
Yeah.
for that very reason. And my wife was a big proponent of me getting rid of it. I'm
Yeah.
back on it just
Yeah,
recently.
me too.
But
Yeah.
it's like for that
Yeah.
reason, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but I like I hit 40, and well, and I'm 41 now, but I'll say there's moments. So here are the 3 seasons of my life, 4 maybe, 4 seasons of life that I look back and I'm like, you have to go through it. But I hated it. I hated middle school. I hated 7th and 8th grade, because it's awkward. You're just
Yep.
kind of figuring out life.
Yep.
I hated dating, because you're like, I just want to be married. I hated the first year of marriage, because you thought everything was going to be great, and then you
And it's
realize, like,
not.
wait a minute, who did I marry?
Oh
You know?
man.
And then my 30s. I think my 30s, because I felt like I had something to prove to everybody.
Yeah.
But I had read years ago, I read that, and this is hard because this is not biblical necessarily at all, but a guy was saying, as a child, you figure out kind of who you are, what you have your interest in. In your teenage years, you figure out who your friends are. In your 20s, you figure out who you want to spend your life with. Your 30s, you figure out what 1 or 2 things you really love to do, and you can't stand anything else. And
Mhm.
then your 40s to about 60 or so is when you really come into your own. And all through my teenage years, my 20s and 30s, the people that I held in high regard and respected, and I pointed at them, and that's my hero, that's who I want to be like, without fail, were in the prime of their career, in their 50s, or
Yeah.
so. So my 30s, I'm like, I have a lot to prove, and now I'm coming into my 40s. I'm like, you know what? I don't have anything to prove to myself, to other people. You probably heard the phrase, nothing to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to hide.
That's
And I'm
right.
like, okay, that's every day I got to wake up to that.
That's
So
good. Man, okay, man, that's good, brother. So I want to tie this back to a conversation we had with our brother Chris Murray. Chris Murray is another guy here in Utah. Started a church
yeah,
plant, not church planting at the moment. But he talked about a mistake he made was falling in love with this ideal church in the future and not
yeah,
owning that process. And it
yeah,
sounds, you're not worded it that way, but it sounds
yeah.
similar where
Oh
you
yeah,
come with
yeah,
that vision of like, this is what it's going to be,
yeah.
and not actually
Aspirational.
that's the word, aspirational, and
Yeah,
not just living in the present and owning what God gives you.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and trying to create something. And I did that too. I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, I created all that, like you said, with the programs and the systems, we put
yeah.
all that mess in place. And of course, you had, man, everyone on this podcast has had more people than me. So
No,
everyone,
no.
but that first full year after our grand opening service, it was just
Yeah,
me and my wife. So
yeah,
like, I'm trying to create all these programs and systems for two people,
yeah, yeah.
like, it's just the
Let's have a
foolishness
staff
of,
meeting.
yeah, bro,
Yeah.
don't, you're
A
laughing like I didn't, you're
volunteer meeting.
laughing like I didn't do that. I mean, how
Yeah,
stupid. So,
yeah,
but it's like, but how much if I just owned the situation we were in
yeah,
and
yeah,
loved that,
yeah,
and the people that, there's some studies that's been done in Utah with people coming out of the Mormon church.
yeah,
And it depends on the study you look at, but one says it takes someone leaving the Mormon church 7 gospel interactions. Another one says 17. Either way, it's not, it's this process of someone coming
yeah,
to faith, and you don't know which encounter you are. Like, you don't know if
yeah,
you're encounter 1 or if you're encounter 12. And I mean, praise God, we've seen some encounters 17 where people have gotten saved. But that goes, like you were just talking about, stewarding, like those people that come in for the season, and you want to pour into them and care for them, and wherever they go, just being a good steward of now.
mhm,
And I want to do that too. Like, right.
yeah,
And that is so much more freeing. It's because I'm
yeah,
just owning, like, this is what he's given me today.
mhm,
And I'm going to
yeah,
own that today. And
yeah,
I'm not going to get distracted by what
yeah,
what could be or what may be coming
yeah,
down the road.
yeah,
I think when I'm hearing your story, and that's a good takeaway and a good
yeah,
reminder for me, bro.
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe it's we kind of move towards some application outside
yeah,
of that takeaway I've made.
yeah,
Anything else you would just tell a guy coming behind you,
yeah,
starting, maybe coming from the same situation? He's coming from a
yeah,
big church. Like,
yeah.
talk to
I
him.
would, I would say, right now, here's what's going on. You think your answer to loving God and doing ministry is all about how hard you work.
Mm,
You are working yourself to death, but here's what you're really doing. Here's honestly what you're doing. You're not working yourself to death. You're worthing yourself to death. You are so convinced, and you've got your work and your worth so wrapped up in each other.
yeah.
You've blurred the lines, and you've lost sight. And I say this out of love, but like, there's no amount of love and respect that's ever going to fill that need in your life.
Mm,
There's no amount of worth. I'm walking with my wife the other day, and she says, listen, I love you, but I could back up a dump truck full of love and encouragement and affirmation and pour it all over you, and it still wouldn't be enough. And you have found that in God. And I said, wait a minute, you said I still need that? I haven't. And she said, no, you've changed. And that's
yeah.
encouraging to hear your spouse acknowledge that God is working in your life. But I think to tell my friends out there, to say, like, listen, it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
things aren't as bad as you think they are. And you're working, like, let me put it this way to whoever's out there.
Yeah.
If you had somebody from your church who came to you and said, I want to go plant a church, and I'm going to take my wife and my kids, and I'm going to take everything I have and put it on the line, and I'm going to do my very best. And they go and they just start something, anything, no matter how big or small. Would you be proud of them? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think about, if I had somebody come to me and say, hey, Matt, I want to go start a church outside of Philly. I'm going to take my family. We've got into a set of property. We run, 30 people or so on a Sunday morning. And we've been there over a decade. We're raising our kids there. Our kids are learning to love people and love God. We're helping people take their next step. I would go, man, like, wait, I am so proud of you. I am so, so proud of you. Like, I can't tell you how much joy that brings to me.
Yeah.
Well, how much joy then does God have over you and what you're doing? Like, don't discount what's happening and what God's doing in your life. That God is so proud of you. He's so proud of you.
It's good. Brother, I appreciate that encouragement, and I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing your story and
Yeah.
man, just the vulnerability and the transparency. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope this has been helpful for you as you listen. Again, this is Everything I Did Wrong as a Church Planter, a 1,000,000-part series. If you found it helpful, please pass it along to your church planting friends, your team. If you know a church planter, someone who's either preparing to go, has gone, please send this their way. And again, if you found it helpful, we'd appreciate if you'd leave us a rating or a review. That way others can find it and find it helpful as well. I was joined today by my friend Matt Manney in Pennsylvania. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Logan. Appreciate it.